If you've ever played Left 4 Dead 2, chances are you've jumped into versus mode at least once. And honestly, the experience there is not great. There is no proper ranking or MMR system, lobbies are completely random, and player skill varies wildly. New players get kicked all the time, and the community can be just as toxic as the spitter herself.
No, wait. Wait.
Despite the mod's massive potential, there's great teamwork, creative infected strategies, versus often devolves into pure chaos. Games fall apart, lineups completely change, and it's rare to even finish a full lobby with the same players. But did you know that Left 4 Dead 2 actually has tournaments and even some pro players? Even in a game that was never really designed to be competitive, there are elite players, real matches, and even some leagues. Today I want to talk about an unknown side of Left 4 Dead 2 that's genuinely fascinating. What versus should look like in an ideal world and how you can still play it even in 2026. But first, let me ask you a simple question. Who do you think would win? Terrifying, physically powerful mutated infected, or some tired, hungry, lost survivors? Even though the game is obviously framed as a horror survival story about 4 struggling heroes, players eventually turn the survivors into just killing machines, and this applies to all 3 game modes. These 4 Terminators can clear rooms and open spaces like an elite squad of special forces. Over the years, the average skill level in Left 4 Dead 2 has skyrocketed, and top-tier survival players can effortlessly gun down any infected. As a result, Versus ends up being unexpectedly harder for the zombies, not the humans. Versus itself also uses a very simple and, honestly, I would say primitive scoring system. 2 teams take turns playing as survivors and infected. The team that scores more points as survivors wins. The farther you make it through the map, the more points you earn. Each survivor alive at the end gives you an extra 25 points, and if both teams tie on distance, the bonus goes to the team that dealt more damage as infected. As you can probably guess, this system is flawed for a lot of reasons. The biggest issue is that the game doesn't reward clean, coordinated play at all. You can reach the safe room without taking a single hit, save all your medkits, and it barely matters. Those 25 bonus points are tiny compared to the overall score of the game. Very soon modders and experienced players started changing the rules. But to understand why, we need a bit of Left 4 Dead history. Versus has always been asymmetrical, and skilled survivors have always had a huge advantage. We already talked about that, but I gotta say, even in the first Left 4 Dead, it became obvious that infected had very little they could do against a very well coordinated team. Versus maps are packed with medkits, peels, pipe bombs and molotovs. A good team can easily show hunters away and also blitz through maps at lightning speed. Once tier 2 weapons, assault rifles and fast-firing shotguns become available, the infected basically stop being a big threat. The game just turns into target practice, and shooting in Left 4 Dead 2 is very forgiving. There is low recoil and low spread. In addition to that, experienced players figured out that you can just quickly rush big sections of the map while the special infected are on cooldown, which means you only get so many opportunities to land a perfect combo attack. Left 4 Dead 2 also has some limitations on common infected. If here are too many of them, the game won't spawn more, which means you can rush through, leave the zombies behind and run through almost empty sections of the map, which again makes the whole game significantly easier. The only real way for the infected to deal serious damage is through the witch or the tank. The witch isn't much of a threat since experienced players can crown her with a shotgun. Even in public versus, that's a common knowledge nowadays. The tank is a different story, of course, but even then, everything depends on the environment. In some locations he is devastating and in others he is nearly useless. It all comes down to terrain, cars, dumpsters to throw, and also team support and where the survivors choose to fight him. In open areas, the tank is weak and has to rely on buying time and waiting for his teammates to do some damage, and that's why he's just throwing rocks somewhere from the roof. And basically even this doesn't really work this well because players learn to shoot the rocks in the air. And because of this, infected players started to rely heavily on coordinated insta-kill setups. They are known as 3+1 or quad. These were different names for the very same idea: instantly wiping the survivor team using grabbing infected. In Left 4 Dead 1 this meant 3 hunters and a smoker. In Left 4 Dead 2 it became charger, jockey, smoker and hunter, and pulling this off consistently was extremely difficult, which is why successful executions often ended up in frag movies on YouTube. But this was a big problem in Left 4 Dead 1, which lacked chargers and spitters, and there was no way to reliably deal damage. So because of that, players began creating configs to make survivor gameplay harder, and one of the first was Seva config, used in ESL and most early tournaments. Its first version removed all tier 2 weapons from the game, medkits were only available in safe rooms and no longer spawned throughout the map. Every map guaranteed at least one tank. This dramatically increased the infected's chances of wiping teams and made the game far more balanced and exciting. Eventually, even that was not enough, because survivors kept evolving faster than the zombies. Seva was replaced by Rotoblin, which pushed things even further. Now medkits were replaced with pills and additional balance tweaks were introduced. Pills were really great because they forced the survivors to act quickly, and if they were slowed down, their HP was ticking and there was like a big increase in difficulty. So overall, this became the gold standard for competitive Left 4 Dead 1. For a brief time, Left 4 Dead even had small ESL leagues, but it didn't last very long, because Valve released Left 4 Dead 2 just a year later, with new weapons, maps, and of course, the new balance. In Left 4 Dead 2, both survivors and infected gained powerful new tools. The new special infected are far stronger than their Left 4 Dead 1 counterparts. The spitter basically prevents safe camping in tight rooms, and this was a popular tactic used to battle boomers and hunters. The charger can easily get some insta-kills or knock survivors off ledges, which makes certain map sections extremely stressful, and it gives infected the ability to secure consistent advantages, or even win maps outright in a single blow. At the same time though, survivors got melee weapons, and these completely counter hordes and make dealing with boomers trivial. Even 40 common infected aren't nearly as dangerous as they used to be back when survivors had to rely on showing, or they could run out of ammo, and this was a big issue. Even with more complex maps and brutal crescendo events, survivors still bulldoze through everything like Terminators, and as soon as a lobby fills with semi-competent players, the fun starts disappearing again and it becomes very much one-sided. And that's not even the biggest issue. Left 4 Dead 2 has no real matchmaking or MMR system. You can end up with total beginners doing random nonsense, or maybe some hardcore veterans with thousands of hours who will kick you for the smallest mistake. Players leave every 5 to 10 minutes, and by the 4th or 5th map, the entire roster is often composed from absolutely different players. All of this makes the experience incredibly inconsistent. You might waste 1 or 2 hours in absolutely miserable games, or once in a while, you find the perfect lobby and play a full campaign packed with epic moments. But most of the time, you just get kicked or called every slur in the book. Because of this, most experienced players nowadays play on private servers with custom rules. Newbies usually cannot really find these servers, so of course the overall match quality is much higher and far more competitive. Some of these servers run professional configs, which makes the gameplay more serious. But at the same time, some servers go in a completely different and honestly pretty dumb direction. They have things like player-controlled witches. That stuff can be fun, of course, but it completely ruins the balance and immersion, and personally I don't like them very much. And of course, toxic teammates never really go away. Team balance is still an issue, because your random stack might be just weaker overall, and players still live after failed rounds or bad moments. There is no MMR, so it's completely random. And many of these servers also have closed communities, and you kinda don't fit in. So you feel like an outsider or an outcast joining a group of friends with their own inside jokes and memes, and people play there just to hang out with each other, and Left 4 Dead is just, some background noise for the conversation. Because of that, truly hardcore players who look for a challenge they wanna play something else. And that demand was eventually met by two major platforms, CEDAPug and Left 4 Dead Central. I personally played most of my matches on CEDAPug, so I'll focus on that. But overall, the two platforms are quite similar. They introduce strict rule sets, proper matchmaking and an MMR system. Unlike standalone servers, CEDAPug is a full platform. You register, queue up and wait for opponents at your rating level. Once a match is found, a map is selected and you join the server through IP. You are not allowed to leave the match until it's fully finished, otherwise you get a temporary ban. And this is where real competitive Left 4 Dead 2 begins, in a format that's very close to actual tournaments and leagues. As you can probably tell, getting there is not really easy, but this experience is absolutely worth it. Matches are taken very seriously. Players actively communicate, they support each other, and they do everything they can to win every single map. Playing in a coordinated team like that feels amazing, and competing against truly skilled opponents on equal feels even better. This version of Left 4 Dead is completely different from vanilla. You genuinely need to cooperate with your teammates and give it everything you've got. And that's what makes it so interesting. It reveals a totally different side of this game. You start tracking infected respawn timers in your head, you clear rooms to prevent spawns and watch for them, you cover your teammates and just plan your play in advance. To me, that's a much more engaging way to play. You're fighting for every map, every point and even every HP. Thanks to the configs and balance changes, the game feels more competitive and therefore more interesting. Very few games can deliver that feeling of relief and adrenaline when you survive a witch, a tank, a massive horde, burn through almost all your ammunition, run out of pills and still make it to the safe room as a full team. And in this game mode, HP count for the total score, so it's kinda important. And then it's your turn to get revenge. Now you're playing as the infected, setting up traps, syncing your attacks and doing everything possible to pull the rug out from under the enemy team. Matches in Left 4 Dead 2 feel incredibly intense and fast-paced. The game constantly throws you on an emotional roller coaster, and that's exactly why it's fun to play, especially when it's paired with high-level competition. But that said, even here, in competitive Left 4 Dead 2, things are not exactly perfect. The first big issue is ping, and for most players it's often over 100 in many matches, which makes it much harder to show your true skill. The servers are based in South America, so if you're playing from US or maybe you're from South America, it's okay, but if you're from Europe or Asia, that can be painful. In addition, Left 4 Dead 2 has a pretty weird hitbox system, which makes it really difficult to properly hit both survivors and infected, and even with a good ping, it's an issue, but when the ping is terrible, this becomes a very big problem, because in Left 4 Dead 2 it's often a matter of life and death situation with things like charger insta-kills or skidding hunters or jockeys. It's incredibly important and it definitely hurts the experience, though it's still not the biggest problem.
What's this? Huh? What's this? What the fuck is this, motherfucker?
For some strange reason, Left 4 Dead 2 is massively popular in Peru, to the point where the best team in the world for a long time came from there. As a result, most players on CEDAPug speak Spanish. If you don't speak Spanish, well, you'll have to adapt. Be ready to get called gringo and don't expect people to switch to English very often, even though English is technically an option in matchmaking, but most of the time everybody still speaks Spanish and they don't really care about you. But that said, not everyone is like this, and I've had some great matches where players made an effort to translate at least some important calls for me. And what about toxicity and trash talk? Well, there is no escaping that. The skill bar here is much higher, so if you mess up a tank fight or make a mistake as a survivor or infected, get ready for some very honest feedback about your skill. A lot of it happens in Spanish though, so you might not even understand it, and I guess it's kinda good, but unlike public servers, you cannot kick teammates here. So you are stuck together until the end of the match, and even if you end up hating each other, you still have to work together to win. One important detail: MMR is calculated per map, not just by overall score, so you gotta win every single map even if you're losing the whole campaign. In theory, this should motivate people to stay and play the whole campaign, although if the start went to shit, some players, well, they just resort back to their old public behavior. There's also one huge downside for me personally. For some reason, final maps with evacuation are never played on CEDAPug or in most competitive Left 4 Dead 2 formats, and that really sucks, because finals are often the most iconic, intense and action-packed parts of a campaign. People told me that finals are excluded because they usually turn into pure camping and defense on a small area, where survivors once again have a big advantage, even with 2 tanks. Well, also maybe finals are just too random or poorly balanced, and you know, still it hurts me to see them completely removed, because those maps are legendary and they have a lot of atmosphere and vibe, they're just exciting, you know? And also, if we get back to scoring system, the team that wins the campaign overall gets an extra map win that is added to their score, so that's pretty much how they deal with the lack of the 5th map. So high level Left 4 Dead 2 on CEDAPug gives me more emotions than almost anything else in this game. There are intense matches with skilled players and insanely dramatic moments that demand full concentration. It's genuinely exciting to play, and it's also deeply rewarding. Overall, it's a great experience, but of course still far from perfect. And honestly, we'll probably never reach the ideal version of competitive Left 4 Dead, because the game was never designed to be a competitive game in the beginning, so most players even today, they see this game as a casual, fun co-op experience, and Valve has clearly moved on from Left 4 Dead 2. We probably should not even expect a 3rd game, because, you know, it's Valve, they hate number 3, and that's a real shame, because the game has massive potential. Just imagine official matchmaking, proper tournaments, and some top-tier teams. If Valve had decided to seriously support the competitive side of that game, it could have been something different. Sadly, that never happened, and it probably never will. That's it from me. Have you ever tried playing competitive Left 4 Dead 2? And if so, what was your experience? Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more games retrospective, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.